has previously taught African Studies, History, and Entrepreneurial Leadership and English Language, and worked globally in youth development and policy organizations. She's a graduate of McGill University and holds a master's degree from the School of Oriental and African Studies and the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. Thank you so much, Nolizwe, for joining us. She's going to be facilitating this session on alternative education models and economic growth for Africa. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Busola, for the introduction. And hi, everyone else who's in the room. Maybe because we are such a small and intimate group, I can invite people to unmute themselves and introduce themselves. If you could just say, your name and where you are and what it is you do. So for example, are you a student? Are you an entrepreneur or something else? So if you feel comfortable, please do unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat if you would prefer that.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes, we hear you.
I'm Ibuku. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm a student.
Okay, nice to meet you, Ibuku. Please forgive me if I have butchered your name, but thank you for your introduction. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves? I think we have Amanda in here and Tife. And okay, Amanda is from Lagos, Nigeria, a STEM educator and data scientist. Very nice to meet you. Tife, I don't know if you're with us, but.
Hello, good morning.
Hi.
Okay, so Tife Ipo. I'm a medical doctor and a public health enthusiast and a researcher. And I'm passionate about education and the future of our children, African children particularly.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us and for your introduction. And then I see we also have Sheba, who is one of the panelists. Sheba, we were just introducing ourselves because we are a small enough group to unmute and chat. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and actually what I will do is talk a little bit about the work that I do, but this is a workshop style of engagement, and so we will be just relying on each of your experiences and observations and your expertise to come up with some of the things we think need to make up alternative models of education to prepare young people for the future of work, which is really already here. So please just give me a moment while I share my screen, and I will talk a little bit, and then we can all have a chat. Okay, please let me know if you can see the screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, thank you. So we just have we have three objectives for the session. So we want to understand or further understand why there's need for alternative approaches to education for economic growth. We want to also brainstorm what the opportunities are, what factors need to be in place, and what challenges remain for the pursuit of this alternative model or these alternative models, and then actually come up with some kind of action plan to help us work towards this future scenario. So I'm going to start with an icebreaker, which you can type a response to in the comments. And the question is, what is your dream for your country? So I said your country because I know not everyone is in Nigeria or from Nigeria in the room. I, for example, am from Zimbabwe and I live in South Africa. And Sheba, I'm sorry I missed where you're from, but I know it's in the East. So let's just take a moment and type in a few things. What are the things that you dream for your country or for the continent as a whole over the next 30 years? And this can be anything from the social conditions, the economic trajectory, or just the quality of life for yourself and people like you and others. So we'll just take a moment to respond to that. So for some reason, I can't open up the chat and also share my screen. So can I invite someone to share any responses that have been shared, please?
Anyone can read? Oh, I
Mhm.
can. I don't want to
Yeah.
be the one in the face, so maybe somebody else. In the face.
Yeah, anyone else? Please feel free. Imagine we're in this room together in person.
Okay, I can read.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure if it's Mr. or Miss Balongan says, I want a country that is suitable and enabling enough to be what one wants to be, such that we don't box people into stereotypes.
Wow, that's powerful. Thank you. So a country where we can self-actualize. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yes. And another dream is, in terms of education, I hope Nigeria would be able to shift its emphasis from grades to action knowledge and skills.
Great.
Snaps.
Yeah.
And staring, I think this is Miss Busola. She says, my vision for my country is a place where young people are empowered to create jobs and lead change.
That sounds very on brand for Ms. Busola.
So far, that's all we have.
Okay. Okay, great. No, that's a great start. So a lot of what's been shared is probably the reason that we just wanted to share a few facts or some data that, you know, we probably are aware of these realities, but sometimes when you see the numbers, you get a sense of just how dire the situation is or, you know, might appear. But at the same time, it shows us the level of the amount of work that we need to do to actually change things, turn things around. So the global youth unemployment rate is staggering. It is 3 times that of the unemployment rate for adults. We know that the GDP growth has been lagging, and you know, this is data from that particular point is from 2017. So we can imagine that it's probably worse now that we're experiencing a global pandemic. And then the point that always stands out for me because of the work that I do working with young people is that there are, you know, 10 million young people who are joining the labor market. and yet only 3 million jobs are being created. So already we see this need for new jobs, and those jobs actually aren't being created quickly enough to absorb all these new entrants. And as we know, the youth population in Africa is we have the largest growing youth population. So all these young people are one day going to be adults and people who are in need of jobs and a source of livelihood. And so given this rather stark reality check, something we might consider here is, what then is the role of education? So before I get into education, I want to talk a little bit about, well, okay, maybe before I get to my next point, another point I want us to reflect on, and maybe here we can just unmute and say out loud, what are the things that you want to change about the economy or the education system in your country, and why do you want to change those specific things? So I could start with mine. As I mentioned, I'm from Zimbabwe, and one thing that I would change, one thing that frustrates me is the amount of investment that goes into the education system. So I don't think our teachers are paid enough. I don't think enough investment is made into teacher training. So equipping teachers with the skills to, and the resources to teach children at every level of schooling, from primary all the way through to university. And as a result, you see people who say, well, why would I give 100% at work if I'm not even earning that much? And yeah, so that's one thing, for example, that I would change about the education system in Zimbabwe.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I think I would like to, I'm from Nigeria. One of the, I'm a parent, I'm just a concerned parent, For me, particularly, I would like to see that the, what's it called? How I say it, schools that are just out to just make gains, without impacting competence into children.
Yeah. Such a good point. Because it makes you wonder, what's the value of the education in your community, right? Are you overpaying just because the school has decided, it's about the name and not so much about what's actually being taught? Or are there parts of the country where, if they raise their fees a little bit more to match, let's say, the national standards, then that quality could translate to what's being taught and how it's being taught?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Hi, everyone. Yeah.
Hi.
Yes. For me, I am looking at addressing the leaky unemployment pipeline in Nigeria. For one thing, Nigeria is one of the countries that get to develop a lot of young talents, but we have difficulty in ensuring that young people transition effectively from education to employment. So I look forward to redefining our curriculum for it to be future based, because we're still the old curriculum is not really addressing needs, and students are not learning what they are meant to learn for this emerging world and emerging technologies. Sorry, I'm driving. I'm just trying to be careful.
Oh no, thank you. No, thank you. That's such a valuable contribution, because what then is the point? It becomes it's not only a philosophical question, right? Where you're saying, what's the point of education? But practically speaking, what and how are we preparing young people for what comes after school? right? So the transitions are such a key part of growth. And yeah, so I just want to just echo the frustration, the concern that is in your contribution. Any other thoughts anyone would like to share?
Yes. Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Yes, I'm Taiwo from Nigeria. I think
Welcome.
my own opinion in Nigeria, I think there is so much emphasis on grades. So students go to school to learn, even parents, teachers, government, employers of labor put emphasis on grades. So people don't go to actually learn skills or competencies, they just go to cram and then to have good grades. So you find people graduating. So really, Nigeria is not really, the plan is not really that we are not having graduates, but most of them are not actually employable. Because when somebody say, okay, I finished with your first class, and you engage the person in a simple discussion, you're surprised by the shallowness of his or her mind. And you'll be like, how did you have this first class degree in school and your conversations, your relationships are so poor? So I think emphasis on grades have actually depreciated the quality of our education here. So I think if you place much emphasis on content, on skills, on competencies, I think we'll get more productive educational system in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you so much. We're actually, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I was one that made the comment about grades in the comment section, and as a student, I keep saying that people that have gone ahead of us keep saying graduates are not employable, and I think I see that because there's so much emphasis on grades. So, for instance, I am so pressured as a student, not exactly to learn, but to please my lecturers, write what they want to see so that I can get the marks I want to get and move on. And I do not think that approach will help anybody in the long run, because I might finish with a first class, but I would not have had what I should have gotten from the university system. So I think that this is a very big problem. We are too grade focused, whereas we're not doing the needful to actually impart people that are coming up with the adequate knowledge and skills. And so it's a vicious cycle. People keep coming out, they can't give what they need, and everybody keeps complaining the economy is not moving forward because the quality of people out there is just not it. So yeah, I just wanted to corroborate the last point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, we're coming back to this question of what then is the point? You get all these grades, good grades, and then what? And so that's what we're trying to unpack and to challenge in this session. I'd just like to give an opportunity if anyone else would like to respond to this question before we move on. Okay, that's fine. So I mentioned earlier that I work with young people, and actually I work for a program called the Anzisha Prize. And what Anzisha does is we identify, connect, and support young entrepreneurs from across the continent, so from all over Africa, entrepreneurs who are under 25. And the reason that, so for the last 10 years, Anzisha has supported about 140 young people who themselves have become job creators, right? So they've been given support, they have created ventures that have enabled them to, employ other young people and help them to attain their livelihoods. But in addition to that work of directly supporting very young entrepreneurs, I also work with teachers where we come together and we say, okay, if someone is looking to transition into entrepreneurship after school, so that's not to say they're only doing entrepreneurship, right? They might be going on to university, but also pursuing entrepreneurship. How do we prepare them for that pathway, right? So starting out in high school and maybe even younger, what kinds of skills are we trying to develop in them? What knowledge are we embedding or facilitating the learning of through them, through our teaching? And so what we found is it's so important for teachers to be clear about why they're teaching. So what is their objective? The reason that we focus on entrepreneurship, and you might have heard it when Sheba was talking about the curriculum at African Leadership Academy, we see that entrepreneurship could contribute to addressing the unemployment problem across the continent. So note that I'm not saying it's the solution or the only answer, but it is one of the many answers that we should be exploring to address this issue. And just from the figures that we see here, and even just based on some things that you have mentioned in this session, is that the jobs that we see today require a certain skill set that we're not necessarily seeing being developed in schools, high school, university, whatever it may be. But even for those people who are employed, the way the economies are developing or changing, there's certain skill sets that even existing employees need to be acquiring. And so again, the question is coming up, what are those skills? What is the knowledge? What are the mindset that need to be developed? And how can we go about doing that? So I'll just quickly move from this slide because I would love for us to get into the brainstorming part of this session. So this is just a figure that stands out to me, which is that small and medium enterprises could provide more than 45% of employment. And in any of our countries, even cities, we know that entrepreneurs can be found around every corner. Those in the informal sector, but others more formally, right? So there's this huge opportunity for job creation. So with that in mind, and bearing the earlier fact from before, or the earlier data point from before, where we said a lot of young people are graduating, but there aren't enough jobs to absorb them into the labor market. How do we then combine entrepreneurship into the bigger economic development or economic growth agenda? So coming back to education, we're all familiar with Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which talks specifically, in one of its targets, it's talking about the role of the need for skills development for employment, decent jobs, and entrepreneurship. And so what we will do for the next little while is just talk about what the case for entrepreneurship education in our schools, in our universities, but also in non-formal education settings. So we can think about entrepreneurship education in 3 ways. Again, I'm probably repeating some things that were mentioned during the panel discussion, but there's the need to teach about entrepreneurship. So what is the theory behind it, or what knowledge must one have to pursue entrepreneurship? There's teaching for entrepreneurship. So if someone were to become an entrepreneur, what are the kinds of skills that they need to have, the competencies? And again, this is not to say that just because you've learned about entrepreneurship that you will become an entrepreneur, but there's something to be said about this last point, which is there's certain skills and just ways of thinking, ways of being that we associate with entrepreneurs. And perhaps you can think about, some of the more successful entrepreneurs that you know. What is it about them that has enabled them to get to the point where they are? And how can we create opportunities to practice that kind of learning for young people in our institutions, educational institutions? And so this is the part where I would like us to just spend a bit of time thinking through these questions. So if we want to inculcate a certain skill set, knowledge base in our schools, so that young people aren't just working towards a grade, right? But we want them to be employable. We want them to be able to create opportunities for themselves and others. What would it take? Who should be involved? How do we actually do it? And why do we need to do all this? Or why would we do this? And so I'm going to just stop sharing my screen for a little while, and then I will share a link where we can start typing into typing some responses to these questions. And I think while we do that, we can also just unmute and have a conversation as we do this exercise. All right, does that sound okay for everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Great. All right, so I will post the link in the comments, and then we can take it from there. Can you get access to the slides? Yes, I will share these with Ms. Busola. Okay, so I will, there we go. Some people are in here already. Let me bring us to the slide we were looking at. Okay, so how do we implement entrepreneurial learning to foster economic growth? So again, as we're thinking about this, let's be as specific as possible, right? So what would actually need to or to be able to create their own opportunities. So please feel free, let's enter our responses here, or, I mean, I'm happy to also type them up as people share out loud. Apologies. Are there any ideas that someone would like to share to kick us off? So what needs to be taught? What kinds of skills should we be trying to develop, and why? Why those? And we're on slide 8 if you are joining from a separate device.
Can I contribute to that? Or integrated into the system is, inviting people that are actually on the field, not lecturers, inviting professionals in the field to come and take some sessions with the students. So it's not just a straight jacketed kind of class day in, day out. There should be days when the teaching is practical, and it's not just taught by lecturers, it's taught by people who are in the field, practicing in the field, and know what they need from the students time they come out. So I think that students just really need to be and know how to tackle it, have the skills to tackle it, because I find that if you just throw a student out there now, there'll be so much confusion, like what am I to do? What I was taught in school does not really match what's going on out there. So I think that that shift should be made from theory to practical, and not just practical in a theoretical sense, because we keep saying practical, and what they do is give you a group assignment that is still you struggling with the materials maybe they've given you, something like that, something really abstract and not so helpful. So I think we should really just make a shift. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm adding these to the other slides. So in the who should be involved, I included people from the field who can share real life experiences to students. And then for the how, I put practical experiences, facilitating practical learning. Okay. Other thoughts?
Sorry, I don't know if I got your question well, but from what I think is, to buttress the the statement and the opinion the last person gave, facilitating practical education most times is about also, bringing these ideas to life. I'll give you an example. Basically, students learn friction and all. They just learn the definition, but have they really applied that friction like in integrated science? It's as basic as that, adding a lot of practicalities, even in English, as little as English, for example. So,
yeah. Great, thank you. Okay, so it's not enough to just talk about these theories and these definitions, but how do you bring them to life in the classroom so that students not only see the application, but get an opportunity to practice themselves? Okay, thank you.
Okay, hello. One thing I want to add. I think on that mindset, we need to, I think if we're talking about skills now, I think one mindset we should include in that education is the mindset of process. Making young people understand that entrepreneurship is a process. It's not one big leap or one big jump. No, because people start business today and they want to blow and they want to make it big tomorrow. The process of patience, persistence, trying the same thing again and again. No, that's fortitude that an entrepreneur should have to be able to forge ahead and to take step by step by step. I think we need to learn it because a young graduate finishes school this year and the following year, you want to start a business and make billions. It doesn't work that way. Entrepreneurship is a process. So I think this mindset of process and not just results. We should really let entrepreneurs understand that. Let young people understand that entrepreneurship is a process, not the result per se should not be focused on, but the process should be well understood. I think that mindset should be put in them, young people.
Thank you. May I ask a follow-up question to that? So how do we get them to understand that realistically, right? So what can you do or say to help a young person understand that it doesn't happen overnight? So practically speaking, what would that look like?
Yes, it's just that as we are training them, critical thinking, negotiation, all those things, we should also letting them know that it is a process. There are no overnight success. And I think what we should also address is that this generation is I don't know the best name, maybe a quick fix generation that they didn't want to they just want to make it big. So we want to tell them that, look, I know that we are in the Indomie generation where we want everything to happen fast. But people like Bill Gates, Dangote tell us that success is a process. So I think we need to, so as we are teaching them critical thinking, teaching them negotiation skills, teaching them human-centered design, all those things, we should also tell them that, look, these things takes time. These things are process. We should be not just to make it look like, don't worry, go and start entrepreneurship. The next 2 years, Africa will become big. No, tell them, okay, it's a process. These things take time. So I think we should make the process part of the training, not to make it look like just do this and you make Africa great in the next 2 years. No, tell them these things takes time and it's one step after the other. I think that is what it should be.
Okay, thank you. What I'm hearing is that there's an opportunity to reinforce that message by showing them examples, right? To say, okay, here's what these other entrepreneurs, to share the stories of entrepreneurs and what they have actually been through. So sure, we could show them a Dangote, but imagine if there's another young entrepreneur who maybe isn't that much older than them, to say, here's someone who looks like you, maybe you have a similar life experience and they're an entrepreneur and these are the steps they've been through. I think it helps to bring that element of, you know, realism to their entrepreneurial explorations or dreams. Okay, thank you. Other ideas, other thoughts? So who actually needs to be involved? So we've heard the example of bringing in people from the field. But if you were to implement, if we are to implement these changes in our classrooms or schools, broadly speaking, who would need to be involved? Who else would need to be involved, and why, to actually make this happen? Or maybe I can reframe my question. So I'm not familiar with the Nigerian education system, but for example, how easy would it be for a teacher to just bring in other people to talk about, you know, their professional trajectories or to share about their jobs?
Not so easy, because it's a system and there's a way things are done. And it feels like, you know, for things to move in this country, we need new minds, because there's a system that seemingly doesn't want to change. And every lecturer is coming into that system and cannot really do much in their own classes and things like that, because they have little time and they have a course outline to cover, and they have to test their students at so and so time, and you know they have to say that what they have done. And I feel like a lecturer that decides to, you know, bring in some new methods might not be able to meet up with what the system is demanding. So it's more of the system should be overhauled. So an idea just came to me as we were speaking, and I was thinking, as you know, students enter university in their first year. That's a set of students that will go through 4-year, 5-year courses. Why not make students build something as they enter as a set that they'll build throughout their stay in school? So apart from the fact that they have people come on board and tell them what their professional trajectory is like, the whole 4-year practice or study should include them actually trying to build something for that length of time. So they go to classes and all that stuff, but then they are building something in the field they are trying to get into for 4 or 5 years as a team of a class, such that when someone is saying this is how it goes in the professional world, they can relate. They can relate to the challenges of getting people to agree. They can relate to the challenges of managing conflict in order to achieve a goal. They can relate to starting something from scratch and seeing it blow up maybe at the end of 4 years or 5 years. It could be something just small but related into to what they want, the course they are studying, or something of that fashion. It's not really a refined idea, but I think that it doesn't just do justice for people to say this is how my life has gone in this professional field. I will still just hear it as a story until I get thrown into the fire, thrown into the old system, and then I see for myself. So yes, that's my contribution.
Thank you. That's a rich contribution, because I think it speaks again to the idea of enabling some kind of practice, an opportunity to practice. Because if you're working on something, let's say as a project while you're in school, it's different from you being, you know, a first-time employee and you're suddenly in charge of this thing and you have no idea how it goes. So I like that that idea, that suggestion for a project or something that you're working on over a long period of time. I don't know if Shiva, are you still on the call?
Yes, please.
Okay, could you maybe share a little bit with us about or maybe what you know about the ALA leadership thesis?
Yes.
Is that something you're familiar with? Yeah.
Yes. So the ALA leadership thesis is basically a presentation that all senior students at ALA do before they leave the academy, and it's the last assignment that we have. But basically the assignment is to choose a thesis that we want to focus on. So it could be a question that I'm focusing on. Right now, my thesis question is how cognitive learning is important in education systems. But then I try to relate that to my journey at ALA. So I try to involve my whole trajectory, like my whole academic journey, and also the journey outside of the classroom. So I talk about things that I have learned, or my fears, or different experiences that I have gained at ALA, but in relation to a specific topic. So for me, I'll be focusing on cognitive learning and how the ability for me, how learning to learn has shaped my learning at ALA, and how my experiences have been shaped by understanding how my brain works when it comes to retaining information, and different experiences, and merging them together and seeing how they have contributed to my success or failure or redirection. I don't know.
Great. Thank you so much, Shiba. And what I like about the ALA leadership thesis is that it's really an opportunity to draw from not only the students' interests, but what they've learned in their 2 years at ALA. And it's really an opportunity to apply a lot of the skills that they've acquired, right? There's a research element, there's a presentation element, but also this important piece of reflection that I think we often, well, there's a tendency to overlook reflection, but it's such an important part where you stop and think, you know, what have I learned? How have I learned it? And how can I take these lessons going forward? So thank you again, Shiba, for that. If I may call on our medical doctor in the room, I'm curious to hear how you think entrepreneurial learning could be incorporated into, you know, into the field of medicine or in medical schools.
Okay, thank you for the question. Just as you mentioned, while I don't remember her name, but she's a student, while she was talking about why it's an idea that hit her, why don't we have students build something or start up building something as at a true entry level, you know? And I was just thinking, okay, so I know that doctors, medical people in the medical line, there's nothing, all you're taught is just medicine. And when you finish, you're thrown into corporate markets, you know, whatever markets you find yourself, and you're just lost with no entrepreneurial skills or any financial backgrounds. And you're wondering, okay, so how do I manage this huge money, you know, at my disposal? But I would want to think that just like you said, I think one of the things we could do as per in line with medical training is to have, you know, I would say practically having people who probably work in financial institutions, or having people who have set up, who entrepreneurs themselves, you know, come and give not just seminars, but have how do I put it now? Shall I say, have small group talks where we could be taught how to save and how to think beyond just medicine, how to make money beyond medicine. Okay, so you have this money, what can you do with it? How can you invest it? How can you, you know, even though you're being able, how can you use, you know, what you have to also employ other people or to create a business, you know? So it shouldn't just be that, oh, you're just thinking of how I can just be my hospital and make money. How can I use the same money to also improve the, you know, the economic situations of all my communities, you know, which would also translate, you know, to, you know, not just local community, could, you know, spread out to the state and to the, you know, in the case of Nigeria now, the whole of Nigeria. So my point is, I think that we need, just like the lady talked about, having practical field experiences, having people who are already working, either doctors themselves or having other people in financial institutions or entrepreneurs coming to speak, you know, at medical training schools, you know, how we can properly manage finances and then be able to pull resources together to create jobs for other people.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think what you're saying just shows that there are cross-curricular opportunities, right? So just because you are training to be a doctor doesn't mean you shouldn't have some kind of financial literacy skills, right? I think these are the kinds of entrepreneurial skills, or, you know, some people will refer to them as 21st century skills or future of work skills, right? Where it's like, no matter what field you're going into, no matter what kind of profession you're going to, whether it is a more conventional pathway or a job or an enterprise that you have developed, right? There's still this base set of skills that you need to have just to make it in life, just to get by on a day-to-day basis. So thank you again very much for sharing that. And then Taiwo, thank you. Your contribution, you're saying entrepreneurship education should be included in medical school curriculum, especially during pre-clinicals. Okay, thank you very much. So maybe we have just a few minutes left, and I thought we could spend some time talking about the ecosystem as we see it. So what are the strengths in the existing ecosystem that we could leverage to help us move towards a more enabling approach to education for economic growth? What needs to be in place? So what are the drivers, whether it's social, economic, or political factors? And then what are the barriers that exist? So what are the blockers that we know exist or that you imagine exist as we try to change or modify the education system?
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, to start with, I think government policies needs to be addressed. Because a lot of time I think a lot of time, let me use the word outsiders of governance, they talk so much about changing the system, entrepreneurship, education, but we keep meeting this brick wall each time because government policies stand firm in our face, and we seems to be helpless in the law. So no matter how much we have talked, okay, this should be done, this should be done, this should be done, this should be done, government policy say no, this is how we want it to be. So I think if you really want to, the ecosystem wants to work, I think we need to address government policies. We need to make these decisions along, let me say, side by side with government, with the government, with stakeholders in the educational sector. So let's have a round table. It's not just for us to just talk like this as we just finish now and dissect everything and know what is wrong. Let us have a convening with government officials, with stakeholders in the ministries of education, ministries of higher education, secondary education, basic education. Let us dialogue
So all these barriers that are in form of policies can actually be removed. Otherwise, even when we say, okay, this is what we want to do, someone will say, no. So people have said this is the policy, this is how it should be. So I think we need to actually work to look at how policies is actually affecting the implementation of entrepreneurship education in Africa as a whole. I think that's the major barrier we need to actually address.
Okay, thank you. And that's, it's a continent-wide issue where without political will, quote unquote, or buy-in from policymakers, it can be so hard to bring about that change, but not impossible is what I want to believe. As we think about that, what then are the existing strengths that we can identify in the ecosystem when you say, okay, because this is in place, we know that this other change could happen, or this other development could be brought about? Or is everything just a mess and we have to throw the whole thing out?
I think the fact that we have been able to identify our shortfalls and the fact that we need a total system overhaul, I think is a great start. I think is a great start. And the fact that we are beginning to think of what we need to put in place, or we have an idea of the roadmap. We want them to have this 21st century skills, and I think that's a good start. Secondly, we have administrators, parents, stakeholders, particularly, who we don't just only desire. I, for one, I'm a participant of this program just because I'm a parent. And then, I want my kids not just have the ordinary skills I got while having education in the 90s and the early 2000s. I want my kids to have way better than what I had, for them to be able to fit into the future of Africa. So I think the strengths we have are parents who are just as inquisitive as myself and who want to ensure that our kids don't have the same thing as they had. We have administrators and educators who also want that they're not just delivering the usual or the conventional education models. And we have foundations like Steering for Greatness Foundation and other foundations who are pertinent about ensuring to help the educational system in Nigeria and in Africa at large to improve, the quality of education. And hearing in this, conversation we've had today, we talked about identified certain key problems. When you asked specific things we would like changed, if we could change in Africa, or our dreams for Africa, stuff like that. And we talked about making quality education affordable, or increasing the salaries of teachers, and making learning more practical. So for me, I think these are the strengths that we have. However, I'm still a bit not so clear. And this is my question is, okay, not particular, when we keep saying government policies and until we have government buy-ins and all of that, for me, they all look like very far-fetched. At the level where we are, what can we do? It might not be a grand style, change, but it can be subtle change. How can we make that subtle change? That might grow. It has the potential to grow, and we have, to benefit all of it. But how can we, I wish we can just address this question. How can we? And how can we get to, effect this change as gradual as possible? I know for some schools, in quotes, elite schools, where they do the normal conventional curriculum, Montessori and the EFS1, all of that, but they do extracurricular activities where they now put in coding, they put in etiquette, they put in critical thinking. Now, at an extra cost.
Right.
But in my own thinking, I even think what they term extracurricular should actually be the real thing they should be learning, in fact, and not just learning about butterflies and those ones are good, learning about butterflies and law of physics, all of that are good, but what they need to be substantially, to be able to fit into the future of Africa are those skills they are calling extracurricular. How can we integrate this to become the norm, the basic?
That's such a great question. And actually that was going to be a reflection question I wanted to share with the group just as a takeaway, because I know we're running out of time, but the question, essentially repeating what you said, is what can I do to bring about this change? So it's myself as a teacher, myself as a parent, myself as a student, myself as a policymaker, or myself as an entrepreneur, right? So how can I contribute, lend my skills, my knowledge to helping to bring about some little bit of change? Because I think every little bit counts. And as you said, if we just wait for government buy-in or political will, then we'll be waiting for a very long time. So thank you so much for that question. And I hope it's one that we can all reflect on as we go away. Our time is really short. We're probably going to move to the main room just now, but I just wanted to thank you all for your engagement and for your contributions in this session.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm just gonna close the rooms now. And
Okay.
then
Thank you.
brief. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a great time. Sorry, I probably cut you off in the middle of saying goodbyes or finalizing just now. Apologies if that happened in your room. I just wanted to quickly bring us back together so we can wrap up and complete this session so we can stretch and be ready for the closing session in a few hours. So to just do this, first I want to say thank you so much to our facilitators, Nolizwe, Blessing, and Testimony. I popped into all the rooms and I actually realized that it was a very engaging conversation. And thank you to our participants, the audience, for engaging, because if you weren't engaging, it won't be engaging. So thank you for sharing ideas, for asking deep questions, and rubbing minds, and for having this. You're here because you obviously prioritize Africa, you prioritize education, you prioritize the future of the continent, and I'm so grateful that you are doing that. So just to hear, so that we're not just getting isolated views. Yes, we need more time. We're just going to share across board. So maybe if they're volunteers from any room, apart from the facilitators, they can then add to it. And I would like to debrief the whole group. Please, you can raise your hand and I will give you the floor.
I think our facilitator should review that's what we thought from our room. So
okay, if you have agreed, a facilitator can proceed.
Really, we're giving up the facilitator. Okay, thank you so much. I don't know how much time I've got. I guess I also have to turn on my camera.
I think about 5 minutes. If you can put on your camera, that would be great. 5 minutes, I think.
Okay. Thank you so much. Can you see me? Excellent, thank you. And well, so my group, really, we talked about scaling access and quality of education. So definitely in the context of the future of work. And we started with first understanding, like creating, should I say, setting the cadence really on what we thought, what comes to mind when it comes to quality education and also access. and also scaling in the context of the future of work. Well, we had words like competence, expensive, so expensive in the context of, well, somebody has to pay, and also that word was also really relevant to access. And a really, really important point was raised regarding that, regarding quality of education in the context of the state of the mind of the receiver. It's not enough to keep thinking about content, but then really is the recipient ready for what's being provided. Words also like relevance came up around an adaptability really regarding what the future of work means for those of us who were in our group. Yes, and so we had conversations on where we can start. Where do we start? So some of us said we should start everywhere, and the recommendation was raised around using the problem-driven iterative adaptation approach to ensure that conversations around better policy for quality education and scalability is had, and that while that is going on, sensitization is also done because, well, people, actually not a lot of people know that the future, well, that the nature of jobs are changing, nature of work is changing, and that they really need to take it seriously. Well, some of us suggested also changing the curriculum and improving the curriculum and really teaching industry relevant job skills. And to do that, we really need to go to industry and to get the contribution of those in the industry in the curriculum. And for those who are better able to deliver this education, well, we raise conversations because now we are also exploring alternative models, conversations around families. Like, it's very important that families take this seriously, that they can be potential conduits of this quality education, and that, well, that the people are now exploring homeschooling more, for instance, to improve the content that is made available to their words. Well, the conversation also about traditional institutions of education should still continue to deliver it, but then that they should continue to deliver the education relevant to the future of work. But then that there has to be some accountability mechanism to make sure that the quality is good and that it's really relevant for what the future needs. Well, one of us also had like an idea regarding employers to say employers should not just resort to requiring all of these skills, like the skills alone, but they should also be proactive in contributing to the content. So maybe they do this through internships or industrial attachments, whatever form that might take. The role of traditional institutions was also highlighted, especially regarding sensitization, because, well, a lot of us respect maybe our traditional rulers, our chiefs, and also our pastors and imams, etc. Regarding access, which is the nitty-gritty of our discussion, we said that it does, this education does not need to be delivered through formal schools, and that vocational centers that are closer to people should be explored to deliver this education. And well, we also suggested the taking of gap years just so students better understand. I guess they can take a breather before they have to go straight into work or to even university, so they're better informed on like the kinds of skills they need, the kinds of choices they need to make regarding their future. We also emphasize the need to get parents to understand that there are new needs and that the school fees that they're paying is actually feeding into what's going to be relevant for their words in the future. Regarding sustainability, one of the recommendations that was made was that the curriculum should be living, so something nimble, adaptable as I guess the needs of jobs, the future of jobs is changing, and that this curriculum would also be changing with it. And then there was a really good contribution as well about starting early. So we think about usually the changing future of work, maybe around when the person is in university or maybe after secondary school. We need to start to think about it where the like early years education, so that it's easy for them to begin to grasp those skills, maybe conflict resolution, critical thinking, early on in life. One thing we also discussed is regarding potential risks that might derail Africa's, I guess, plan to keep up with the future of work. And I guess the biggest that was identified was conflict, that it's really important for us to have a better response plan So the example of the COVID pandemic was given. So even if the quality of education is already great in Africa, there was really no plan for infrastructure and how people would access it at home and all of that. So it's really important for us to have some sort of a risk response plan. And then the final recommendation was just towards what Steering for Greatness Foundation can do in this regard, and recommendations around more sensitization is definitely needed. A lot of Nigerians, for instance, still don't know that they don't need some of the skills they've been taught in university, that they need to begin to make up for those gaps. So yeah, that a lot of awareness for corporates should be done, a lot of stakeholder sensitization and conversation should be had in the context of the future of work. And also they also emphasize, well, because traditional institutions are the, should I say, the conduits really, the primary conduits of the education that we still access in the world, that Steering for Greatness Foundation should also prioritize traditional education providers in this context. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That sounded like a really packed conversation. Taiwo, please, you have the floor for the Alternative Education and Economic Growth breakout room. Oh, as Taiwo dropped off. Looks like it's not here anymore. He's still here. Okay.
Okay, so my name is Taiwo Ishola from Nigeria. Sorry, I'm able to put on my video. I'm not in a place I can do that, so please bear with me. Okay, so we discussed about entrepreneurship education, and what we look at, the first major thing we looked at was what should be the content of this education. It's not just about talking about entrepreneurship education. What should be the content of this education? So we identify some major things that are important content that should be there if we have to really implement this. And one of the things we discussed was critical thinking. We discussed it should be part of the content because an average African graduate cannot engage in a critical discussion, cannot think critically. And so it's not just about telling them, go and start business, go and be an entrepreneur. We must teach them how they can think critically. So that is the of that education. We also discussed about negotiation, a critical component of that education. We also discussed about resilience, that we must teach our students, our young people, how to be resilient in entrepreneurship. And one critical thing we also discussed is how we must make them to understand the power of process. Because an average young person starting going to the entrepreneurship world is thinking of making it big in about 1 to 2 years. So we must teach them that, look, entrepreneurship is a process. Building a product or a service takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. So this quick fix generation that we want this to happen. So as much as we know that entrepreneurship education is the inroad to the future, but also emphasize that this thing takes time. Understanding the process is very critical. And then we look at, after what should be the content of that education system, we also looked at who are the people that should actually champion, who are that should be at the forefront of this educational model. We look at those who are already in the industry, like the industry experts. We should be able to bring them to our universities and tell them, okay, come and teach these people, come and mirror to them. So we must be able to bring industry experts from different fields to come and talk to them. So who should be involved in this educational system? Also, we should be able to bring life experiences to the classroom. We discussed that it's not just enough to just say, teach young people about fiction. Experiment it for them. Don't just teach them about business. These things we are discussing. Don't just teach them, go and start a business. Bring DoFeel as a company. Let DoFeel teach them. Let case studies be taught as part of this system so that they don't just acquire the theoretical knowledge without the technical know-how of how to navigate these things in real life. And what we also said in regard to this is that is the African mentality of addiction to grading system. So an average young man young woman in Africa is going to school to acquire only good grades, because that's what we should focus less on grades to more on skills and competencies. And that brings us back to our educational system. Our stakeholders, faculties, and everybody in the system should know that no. So that's why you see a first-class graduate that cannot think critically, that cannot engage in an intellectual discussion. You'll be wondering, how did he get this first class? Because the system has programmed her or him to only cram and give it back to the lecturer, not really understand, or to ask myself, what am I think? So I think this is important. And the last thing we discussed about this is that how can we actually implement this? And that is why we talk about stakeholders in the implementation of this entrepreneurship education. And the first people we talk about are the policymakers, because sometimes the best of our intentions meet a brick wall of policies that just tell you, no way. So I think, so we would like, this effort should not be only limited to Standing for Greatness Foundation meeting like this. The stakeholders, those in governance, those in politics, those policymakers, stakeholders, everybody should join hands together to implement this. So these are the stakeholders that must be involved. And the last thing we discussed before we close the meeting was when we ask ourselves, we can't always discuss things like this and say the meeting is over, that's all. What should it in our different feed, in our different space on this meeting this afternoon? What should we be doing to contribute to this entrepreneurship education? In my own feed, in your own feed, in each person's feed now, what should we be doing actively? We can't always wait for government, we can't always wait for stakeholders, we can't always wait for policymaker. But the question now is that we should ask ourselves, what should I be doing in my own little space, in my own little corner, to actually make the realization of this entrepreneurship education a reality? So that is just a summary of what to discuss in our group. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Well summarized. Finally, gamified education. Who will be sharing on your behalf?
Chika.
If nobody is willing to share, do I do that?
I think she's about to start.
Okay, I think Chika wants to share.
Hello, Echika.
Hello.
Are we sharing? Yeah. Hello.
Hello, this is Omolola.
Oh, okay. All right. Are you going to share then?
Yes. Okay. We had a wonderful section, a wonderful class. The facilitator explained to us the benefit of introducing games into the classroom. And that is not to make the class just for games, but to just serve as an enabler, sort of to help the students to be active, agile, and engage well in class. So he explained to us that it is very important for education to promote games in the class, that it will help us to promote cooperation and even LD competition among the students. So he was trying to say gamification in education helps students to be able to be proactive in necessary critical thinking, problem solving skills, and every other skill. He was some through his organization, how they have been able to use this to teach children to code without teaching them the technicality, without using the tech. They could easily use games, more interesting than just doing looking at codes and they have no idea of what it's all about. So he explained to us how we can use games in our teaching. Instead, we can give points to students, like tell them in a like when we play games, if you win a level, if you win a level, you add points or coins or more life. So he said we can introduce sort of to the classroom. Like maybe we tell students, if you answer a question, you have a point. If you can do something that is not really it is not non-academic, it is non-academic, and if you come to class early or the first person to show me the assignment notes, we earn a point. Like something like that will make students to be smart, and you can easily move them from being a slow child to both learning and activity. It was memorized within 15 seconds, and after 15 seconds, we had to put it down. I think I can still remember the words. We had first we had in the words we have skill set, we have framework, we have active learning, we have create, define. So and it was good. Get the words after 15 seconds. Those that participated could get the word after 15 seconds, but not everyone could get it in the same order. And it's, the facilitator also explained to us that gamification in education allows learners to solve real world problems, even while in the classroom, while learning. Engaging more content, it is fun-filled, and it is more efficient in learning. It motivates the students and encourage cooperation. He also said it's like unlock students' imagination, sort of unlock them. And he made the example of Mavis Beacon platform. It really helped me the mention of it. I was like, okay, that's true. Gamification is so great in education because Mavis Beacon, apart from typing, you have this like escaping from code or trying to show that in our classroom to make our students more engaging and help them to imagination in the classroom to learn more. It makes learning more experiential. So that's just some of what we did in the classroom.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that summary. Gamification in the classroom helps students to solve real problems. Great. Thank you all so much for engaging and for sharing. Just to finalize the session, I'm going to invite as facilitators, thank you for your time. If you have any final words to share with all of us as we wrap up, please, you have the floor now. We can start with testimony, then Nolizwe, then blessing. You're on mute, testimony.
Oh, okay. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much. It was a very eventful time. I think if everybody would, and I mean, stakeholders now in question would take bold steps like this in trying to ensure that you contribute to ensuring that the future of Nigeria and indeed Africa is being built and being groomed. Young leaders are nurtured with future skills that will be relevant to their growth and to their general well-being. I think only then can we begin to really see a light at the end of the tunnel, because currently and over the past years, things have not been the way it should be, particularly in the education sector. So I remember in the opening, before we went into the breakout section, where he had to do the analysis of a lecturer having 19 students to supervise. I mean, things like this really agitates me and then makes me wonder, like, where are we headed? I mean, those 19 students are going to be churned out into the system, and what exactly do you expect them to contribute? So I think as much as possible, stakeholders in education system should do their best to ensure that they live up to expectation, and they try as much as possible to contribute their best in improving education generally. And in the next 10 years, for instance, a whole lot of what we do today in the education sector would have also evolved. And how do we try to evolve with the times and the season? So it's an eventful event for me. And thank you guys once again. I'm very grateful.
Thank you. We've had a good time. We wish everyone could be in all the sessions, but thank you so much. Next, Nolizwe.
Sure. Thank you so much, Busola, and the Steering for Greatness team for bringing this session together. I think it's always refreshing to get into rooms with people, you know, from different industries, different sectors, to talk about this issue that is, you know, on all our minds, morning, noon, and night. But really, just grateful for the opportunity to share ideas and to think of how we can step out of our respective silos and come together to explore what is possible within our own spheres of influence. And yeah, I think just for me, it's a point that that just kept coming up a lot, was just the importance of moving out of the classroom and actually creating opportunities for people to practice, for people to gain experience and exposure and just try different things, and for us to, you know, free ourselves from the shackles of grades and really be intentional about the kind of learning that we facilitate, that we enable, not just in the classroom, because as I think the first group mentioned, the learning can take place in non-formal context as well. Learning takes place at home as well. So there is a role for every one of us in our different capacities to play to help prepare people for the future of work, which, as I said at our group, the future of work is already here. So yeah, just an encouragement to the foundation and to everyone on the call to keep at it. Thank you.